like, are we Uber 2007, where it's $5 and it's entirely VC subsidized, and the promise of driverless cars feels right round the corner, but 15 years later, we're actually still on the long tail of making that a reality. Even Waymo, as cool as it is not cheaper than a taxi in any way, shape or form. So like, there's one, that's the cynic in me of like, actually, we've reached a really sophisticated point, but like, where are the next frontier? Where's the next leap going to come from? Or we're still on that exponential curve.
Joel, introduce yourself. Who are you? Where do you work?
Hello, my name is Joel. I'm a product manager at a company called PhysicsX. We do all sorts of fun things with physics simulations, AI and ML, and try and answer some hard engineering questions with all of that.
Yeah, nice. Okay, and what's your role within PhysicsX? Like, what are you focused on day to day?
So I'm looking at a bunch of things, a lot of the things about us building sort of an enterprise grade platform, so all the stuff you need to do that in terms of permissions and data and bits that are sort of fundamental to making the platform work. But that's also where agents fit in. Agents also need permissions and data, and that's a space that haven't been thought through properly.
Yeah, I mean, that's fascinating, and also something that I suspect a lot of software builders are thinking about right now. I guess is that decision between, do you make your technology agentic and allow agents to control it, or do you not? And I guess if you do decide to do it, then what questions do you need to ask? Because it's not as simple as just asking Claude to look at your product and use it for you, is it?
Yeah, some of these things are being invented as we speak. Some of these things are just standard software engineering best practice. There was a joke when MCP came out that the S in MCP stood for security. That was true for a time. The authentication spec came together mid last year and is now well adopted and understood, and like, that stuff is moving. But there are some open questions of how you do permissions and things for an agent that needs to look at sensitive data. Is that, how do you build the guardrails around that? How long should I have access to that? Who does it pretend to be, or is it a system role? Like, there's lots of like questions that are unanswered there. There's also, if I was in a security role, how do I balance all of the doors we're opening to experiment here with the actual security risks that you're supposed to be managing? It's an interesting time.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah. And so, as a product manager, because your background's not just product, is it, Joel? You're also an engineer by trade as well.
Yeah, spent some time doing data, software engineering, machine learning engineering kind of things.
Yeah, and so from your perspective, like, what if you were a product manager today, thinking about, okay, I have a piece of technology and I want an agent to use it, like, what are the things that someone should be thinking about? Like, what are the big questions that need to be answered before they can do that?
So the thing I found recently is actually the core product toolkit. It's really well suited for building products, and the fact that we can in theory build things quicker is interesting. So like a product requirements document, still really useful, and double diamond sort of design research, still really useful, and lots of good thinking has gone into that. The fact that you can generate the content very quickly is both a good thing and a bad thing. Everyone knows what slop looks like, and you can see it a mile off these days. There's also sort of, I guess, what does an MVP mean these days?
Yeah.
You still want to build a skateboard and a bike and then a car. You don't want to build a car first badly. And the ability to quickly prototype and test ideas with users is still core to the role. The iteration speed is different. The requirements, in theory, all three roles in the product trio, the designer, the PM, and the engineer, the lines are blurring. And I don't necessarily know what the implications of that are. Certainly, the pieces of the puzzle where I would, ask an engineer to do 2 weeks on a prototype and then explain to me the gaps that I didn't understand, and then try and turn that into a product vision and test it with users. I can, in some ways, do that in an hour. I can understand the problem, have it explained to me, I can test an idea before I even ask an engineer to do something. I can even come with a prototype that's working. Now, is that useful? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So we're still learning how to manage these superpowers. There's also a real spectrum of bullishness across all of these roles. You know, even an experienced software engineer who is using Claude for a lot of things isn't necessarily fully bought in. There's some trepidation in different places. Some of it justified, some of it's just skepticism. There's obvious questions of, you know, how mentorship works when you didn't learn the fundamentals. Every generation of computing has said that. The people that, you know, learn higher level languages had the assembly people go, you know, you're not going to understand how this works. This time is different, but it is familiar. Yeah, so like the role is hard to know how it evolves. I feel like I've got superpowers. I don't know necessarily when to wield them. The other piece.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I'll transition is that Marty Cagan recently published an evolution of their thinking of like separating build to learn and build to earn, where an engineer's responsibility is build to earn. So that means it has to be robust. It can't fall over, you know, production grade requirements. If I'm building, I don't have that requirement just yet. I'm not saying to my engineers, here, ship this. But what I am doing is I'm understanding, okay, this is what the pathway looks like. This is where the failure modes are. This is where, if we stripped it down to its like core minimum principles, it's like this is the direction we need to go. These are the things that we're discarding and trading off. So, like, I think what I'm just describing is double diamond, you know, in and out, fan in, fan out, and the ability to like build something relatively high fidelity and then strip it down to the fundamentals and then iterate again and do that again and again is an interesting way of working that would have taken multiple people and months to do anything of the fidelity I can do quickly. But I also, I guess if I'm self-critical, like, how do you avoid navel gazing? Like, how do you know that that's just not you going, oh, of course I like this, I built it, right? Like, how do you keep that user centricity and grounding in reality? But yeah, I'm certainly able to maintain flow state in a way that, I didn't necessarily used to.
Yeah, I think that flow state is becoming a bit of an addiction state, isn't it? I felt that myself. So you said the Kaganism was build to learn or build to earn.
Yeah.
And I guess the difference there being build to learn is your discovery, right? You're building something just to learn from users on whether you're building the right thing, but it doesn't necessarily need to go into production yet.
Yeah.
And you're saying that part of the process has now been, you know, accelerated or at least crushed down to a much short period, which requires less people.
Yeah, and I guess if my role, certainly in the Kagan style of, you know, design-led research, empowered teams, clear vision, clear requirements, understanding like of that discovery life cycle, as well as kind of the soft the soft sides of the role of like motivation and bringing people on the journey and trying to, you know, build conviction and manage stakeholders and all of that. Being able to have a kind of a living and breathing prototype that I can keep showing people as like, this is the vision, this is the way I work, or this is like the evidence of why it should work this way, feels like a powerful thing that I can't step away from.
Right. And you said earlier that, you know, the underlying best practices, like how do you write a PRD, you know, how do you think about user stories, need, all these sorts of things, that's still important because it's what you're using to essentially editorialize your prompts to the agent.
I think it's still true that you can't do any of this waterfall, right? You cannot impossibly know all of your requirements, all of your failure cases, all of your things that users will actually experience if you write a really detailed spec up front. But the you know, the classic primitives of user story, functional requirements, acceptance criteria, all of that stuff is still really useful, and agents follow it. And you can also ask an agent, do you agree that we've met acceptance criteria? Like, you don't have to trust it, but it's the tool, the technique is available to you. So, yeah, I feel that the craft hasn't gone away. I think there are areas where I feel more productive, and I feel that I can understand a problem and build conviction, at least with myself, that we should go in a particular direction by having a all-knowing assistant at all times. Closing that loop to turning it into like revenue-generating product, at least I've not got that far, right? I think I have high conviction that we will get there. And I also think the operational side of a running, living, breathing system, that's an interesting space where agents can always be on call as well later on.
What do you think the gap is? Like, what is it that means that a human still needs to be responsible for the build to earn piece?
I think it is the gut feeling and pattern matching of what it takes to understand how a system works. Now, that could be documented really well. That could be specified really well in markdown files and skills and all of that. But I don't think the rough edges that someone appreciates, the skeletons in that part of the product are really known. You still need to, like, often someone with deep understanding of why the system works that way to really drive things. That's different from saying, I want to ship this feature.
Totally. So you're describing accountability?
Accountability, knowledge of the moving parts, and I guess prioritization of the moving parts. Like a simple one, like philosophical question is, does like an agent understand time? Right? Like it can be trained to. You're
gonna have to explain that one to me.
It could be trained to say, okay, this is probably a week's worth of thing, but like, does it feel any pain of suggesting a week's worth of work or a day's worth of work?
That's so interesting. Right? I've seen it come back with estimates and say, hey, this is going to take you a few hours. It's like, well, no, you're going to do it. It's going to take you 30 seconds.
Whilst that's true. I still think a human that has to be responsible for a production system understands the different dynamics and the downtime costs and the different teams that maybe need alignment and stakeholder management. And I'm also pretty bullish that this will be figured out and more will be able to be driven that way. But I think it's naive to say we're there. And I think I'm also in two minds of whether are we Uber 2007, where it's $5 and it's entirely VC subsidized, and the promise of driverless cars feels right round the corner, but 15 years later we're actually still on the long tail of making that a reality. Even Waymo, as cool as it is not cheaper than a taxi in any way, shape or form. So like, there's one that's the cynic in me of like, actually we've reached a really sophisticated point, but like, where are the next frontier? Where's the next leap going to come from? Or we're still on that exponential curve. I'll also say that like 5 years ago, ChatGPT was still 2 years away. Like, that's a bonkers statement just because of like how much is different now in every way that we work.
Yeah, it definitely feels accelerated. And tantalizingly so. Taking a step back from how a product team is now operating and how that influences, your process and your workflow and things like that, I've heard you speak about the concepts underlying how to build an agentic system quite a lot as well. Things like the harness and stuff like that. And I think these are emerging topics that people wouldn't have even spoken about a year ago. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think the vocabulary we have is all changing. There is also, like, we're in the hype cycle to end all hype cycles, and there's a lot of oh, you're into that band? Oh, I liked them 6 months ago, like, kind of vibes, and like it.
Well, so like last year it was MCPs, now it's like harnesses.
100% that. Like, as cool as OpenClaw is, I have seen a lot fewer people talk about it in the last month than how world-changing it was 4 months ago. In the same way that the debate between CLIs and MCPs was a kind of cool kids position a couple of months ago. But then I will also point to the GitHub CLI is the best CLI out there, and their MCP server is the world's most popular MCP server. Perhaps there's a world that they coexist and solve different problems. So yeah, I think all of these terms are emerging. I think what's also fun to see is the whole world throw every idea at the wall for the last 3 years, and some of the good practices are shaking out. So this
such as
so tool calling in general was something that every team was doing individually. That then Anthropic pushed the MCP standard, a lot of excitement, a lot of adoption. The limitations of that / the things that need to be ironed out kept being ironed out. The emergence of skills, the emergence of when CLIs are the right place, the fact that all three of those primitives are actually pretty complementary. There are some more ambitious, maybe longer term things like A2A as a protocol that I see people adopting in statements, but I haven't necessarily seen the value with. And it's also interesting just from a business point of view of where is the competitive advantage. There is a lot of people that are doing tracing and evaluation platforms. Is there a business there, or are you just going to be commoditized with open source or by the cloud players? It's also interesting to see my old world of the orchestrators, things like Dagster, Prefect, and Airflow. Whilst they're ostensibly related to this space, they're not necessarily best placed in this AI cycle. Dagster's pivoting, Prefect's pivoting, Airflow maybe one, but the point I'm making is that the tools that are useful here are still being defined. There's a lot of activity and things that will be consolidated in the next couple of years. It's really hard to know where the companies are going to really thrive. Is it going to be on the vertical, or is it going to be on the horizontal? Is everything going to be swallowed up by Anthropic and OpenAI as the model bit providers? It's a super interesting time.
Let's talk predictions, because I think that there's a lot of chat, mainly on LinkedIn. You've got these big organizations letting go engineers and blaming AI, and sometimes it's not actually the AI behind the scenes. And then there's these surveys with Fortune 500 CEOs that are probably are not using AI themselves, that are, have commentary on what the future of work looks like. You work at an AI company. You are building agents. In a year's time, how do you see an organization structurally being different? Are we going to see the same roles? Are we going to build products in the same way? What do you think is going to be likely?
I don't think we'll build products in the same way.
Okay.
I think
because you have evidence of that today.
Yeah, and I think if you think of the discovery loop of a meeting recording, a linear ticket, and the ability to implement something, I think that can potentially change how things are at least staged for contribution and maybe reviewed, and where the senior engineer provides their steer is interesting, because I'm kind of assuming no one's writing their code anymore, but they are still responsible for it, and the two are different. In terms of predictions, there's a fork in the road of are we going to see jumps like we've seen? I would argue this GPT-5 class, it's cool, but it hasn't felt like a jump from 0 to 3 or 3 to 4 like it originally did.
Yeah.
There's also the emergence of the open source models and the Chinese models of how much that eats into unit costs and competitive advantage, and how much the harness layer is commoditized will be interesting. You see things like managed agents from Anthropic coming out. That is a interesting play of, we'll do it all for you. You're already paying us for some of it.
Interesting. So you see things like harnesses not being something owned by the software vendor, but something that becomes an orchestration piece for the bigger AI players that people then can stick on top of their product.
I think like anything, there are times where you opt for best in class and roll it yourself. and there are times where it doesn't make sense to do that.
Interesting.
And that's always been true, right?
Would you still train to be a product manager today?
I just changed my title to builder.
Okay. You change your title to builder. Just elaborate on that. I think I know what you mean, but what do you mean by that?
It's kind of related to the wider conversation of all these CTOs becoming member of technical staff. I think the spikes of design, product, engineering are still valid. I think the roles will blur. I think the, slightly unfairly, I know that I am probably better at stakeholder management than some of my best engineers. Like, that's just a different personality spike. But I also feel like I have skills of being the right translator between those different roles. And there's always a place for that. And you're still going to need to get people to agree on decisions and alignment and direction. I think the role is going to be very different. The question of what does the next generation of people leaving university do is a very valid and interesting one. I think I don't know if I'm in the cynic or the optimist category. The obvious cynic position is that they don't have that kind of apprenticeship of what it took to write code without doing it by hand. And they don't know where they're going wrong. The second argument is, if you're born and bred with that tooling and that superpower, how much more productive can you be when you're unencumbered by any other question? So it's the classic thing of, do you allow a calculator into an exam, right? It's what do you need to actually understand?
I think you're arguing that maybe the predefined roles of the past 2 decades might not necessarily be so well defined going forward, but the skills are still needed, the craft is still needed, and an understanding of those things is still needed to be a product builder.
I think so. And it also depends on what kind of product, and it depends on what kind of organization and what kind of team. And I do think we'll see a lot smaller organizations, like the revenue per employee thing will be really interesting. There is that question where we see this first one person unicorn, maybe.
Yeah.
Like I read about someone doing an agent that was looking at satellite imagery and then calling local pool installation companies and taking a commission for lead generation. Like, obviously there's not going to be an unlimited number of ideas like that, but for effort versus reward potentially and that kind of thing, it's very interesting.
Yeah, fascinating. Yeah, well, maybe we should make a list of those things, Joel, and see whether we can make them a reality. But look, dude, always a pleasure. Thank you very much for your predictions. We'll circle back in a year's time and see whether they came true.
Cheers. Thank you. Bye.